I want to thank Allie and Jeffrey and the entire SCD Association for today, for this weekend. What an amazing experience to be able to get together and share our journeys and our experiences. But also, it's nice to sit in a room where we are not alone for once. If you are like me, you partly came for the yummy SCD food that you did not have to prepare. So I'm going to watch the clock. I told Allie and Lisa to give me that because we want to make sure we get done for lunch, right? Okay. So let me go ahead and get started. A little bit of my background. I am originally from a small town in Ohio, Warren, Ohio. I attended college at Kent State University for about 2 years before I moved to South Carolina. I currently reside in Spartanburg, South Carolina, and I finished my undergrad degree at the University of South Carolina. So we are big Gamecock fans in my house. Any college football fans? Go Gamecocks. I finished my undergrad degree in middle school education, and in 2005, I also began teaching at the middle school level. Next week, I start back to work. The teachers go back already. And this will be my 19th year of teaching, and I've been at the same school for my entire career. I currently teach 7th grade science. I love my coworkers, I love my job, I love my students. And most of them enjoy coming to science, whether they have me or one of the other teachers, because we get to do all the fun hands-on labs, and they'll come in and say, "Are we going to the lab today? When are we going to the lab again?" So I really enjoy it. I'm looking forward to another amazing school year. Let me talk a little bit about my family, and then I'm going to move on to my journey here. My amazing family, my husband, Roy, he is my rock, I tell him. He's been with me throughout all of my health issues, and he has been extremely supportive of me treating my ulcerative colitis with the SCD. He helps me on the weekends with food prep. He helps me clean up all the big messes. My family does not follow the SCD, but they do eat some of the foods, of course, along with me. But if they want to have a pizza night, that's fine with me, and I'll just, make some eggs or something, have some fruit. My stepdaughter, Maddie, she is 18 years old. Maddie did amazing in school. She actually graduated a year early. So all of her friends graduated this past May, and she graduated the previous May. Her plans were to go to school for vet tech, but she currently decided to take some time off of school. But she is working, so we're just glad that she's being active, meeting some new people, and making some money too. My son Parker is going to be turning 10 in a couple of weeks, so when I get back, I'll be planning a pretty big birthday party. And he does really well in school too, but if he were here right now and if you asked him if he was excited to go back, he would say no, big no. He loves video games, probably plays video games a little too much, right? So he needs to get back to school and get back to that routine as well as I do as well. And I can't leave out my golden doodle. It looks like we have a couple doodles with us today. Lucy is our 75-pound golden doodle. She's 4 years old, and she completes our family. If she were here today, she would have to come around and say hello to each and every one of you because she loves people. I better get started in my journey. I want to talk first about when I started teaching. When I started teaching back in 2005, I really started developing I really developed an unhealthy lifestyle. If you know anything about teachers, there's always food in the teacher workroom. Donuts, cookies. We're always celebrating something, a wedding shower, bridal shower, always surrounded by food. We were able to go out to lunch on Fridays, and I was gonna have a chili cheese dog and french fries and a couple of sodas, go out later that night with friends and have some wings and some cocktails. So with all of that, I started to notice a huge decline in my health. I was on the obese side of the BMI scale. And I was starting to see some little things creep up. I was in my mid-20s, and I was having issues with gout, of all things. I was also developing a lot of anxiety. I then was on anxiety medications, and I was also having difficulty sleeping at night. So after a few years, I finally kind of looked in the mirror and I said, it's time to do something. Not a diet, but I needed a lifestyle change because I knew I was headed in the wrong direction. I was to the point at this time where I was about to have to go buy a whole new wardrobe because I was too snug in all my other clothes. So I knew it was time to make a lifestyle change. So around 2009, I started that. I was one of those New Year's people right at the holidays. Okay, I'm going to make that change. But this time it stuck. I started working out a little bit. I lived in an apartment by myself, so I really didn't have the money to go join a gym at that time. So I just did some little at-home workouts, some DVDs, 5-pound weights, the little gym at my apartment complex, walked laps, whatever I could do. But the real change was in my diet and really making an effort to eat lots of fruits and vegetables and lean meats. I had great results. I lost 20 pounds pretty quickly. Started seeing some little muscle definition. Was getting excited about that, but I still had some other goals. So eventually, after a couple of years, I did join a local gym and started attending some classes there. During that same time, however, I still was noticing some issues with my health. At this time, I started developing what I thought were UTIs, chronic UTIs. And so I would go to my primary doctor and I would say, I think I have a UTI. And so, of course, they would check my urine and they would come back and say, well, everything's clear, but let's go ahead and do a round of antibiotics just in case. I'm in my mid-20s at this point. Knowing what I know now, I wouldn't have taken those antibiotics, knowing what it was probably doing to my microbiome. A few months later, same thing, I would come back and say, I feel like I have another bladder infection. My urine would come back clear, but they would suggest another round of antibiotics. This probably went on for 1.5 to 2 years. Surprisingly enough, I worked with 2 women who had a very rare bladder condition. And so I opened up to them one day and I said, I just don't know what's going on with me. I always feel like I have a bladder infection, but it never shows up in my urine. And they both looked at me and said, you need to call the urologist, make an appointment with a urologist right now. I thought, well, what are the chances of these 2 ladies both having this rare condition that work together alongside me and that I'm going to have that condition too? It's just not going to be. I did make my appointment to see the urologist, and he was phenomenal. He asked a gazillion questions, spent a lot of time with me. And then he did go ahead and decided to go in and do a cystoscopy. So he went in and took images of my bladder and took some biopsies as well. I remember when I kind of woke up after the procedure, and he came in to talk to me. And he said to me that I had the worst case of interstitial cystitis that he had ever seen, or it's called IC for short. This happens to be the same bladder condition that my 2 coworkers have. Interstitial cystitis is a chronic bladder condition. Currently, there's only about 700,000 to 1 million Americans diagnosed with IC. So very rare. I wonder if it's really not as rare as 700,000 to 1 million people, but rather it's misdiagnosed as UTI. I actually read, too, that it currently takes about 3 to 7 years from the time someone goes to their general practitioner to see a specialist and get diagnosed with interstitial cystitis. So again, maybe it's not as rare as the results say, 700,000 to 1 million people. There are some treatment options. Of course, there's some medication. I think one of my coworkers did take the medication. I decided I didn't want to do the medication. I was going to try diet because my doctor actually did talk to me about diet for my IC. And he said that it is possible that you can find your triggers. And he explained to me to think of it as like pouring salt in a wound. If something that you poured into a wound was going to be painful, then something that you eat might be painful as well. Citrus fruits were a big trigger for me. I love pineapple. I could sit and eat a pineapple the whole pineapple in one sitting, right? But I figured out really quickly that pineapple was a trigger for my IC. No more pineapple. Coffee was another big trigger for me. They do sell, I think, lower acid coffee, but I just kind of cut back on my coffee a little bit. Chocolate was another big trigger for me. So there were some things that I found, and I was actually able to treat my IC through diet. For about the next 2 years, I really didn't have any issues with my bladder, just from cutting out some foods from my diet. No medications. Interestingly enough, when I did become pregnant a few years later, I have not had any symptoms of IC for the last 10 years. So I hope I continue in that path. I can eat lots of pineapple now. I can drink lots of coffee, so it's kind of weird that maybe my body kind of reset. I probably need to go ahead and fast forward then to the year of 2013 when my UC symptoms then began. In January of 2013, I lost my mother to cancer, breast cancer that came back with a vengeance. I felt like during that time, my body was under attack. I don't know if you've ever lost anyone who's close to you, but it really affects your body too. And I was really struggling, knowing that we were going to lose her. And about a week and a half after my mother passed away, I found out that I was pregnant. I was all over the place emotionally. I even asked, why now? Why am I pregnant now? I should be grieving the loss of my mother and not being excited about a pregnancy. How am I going to do both? But the Lord knew the timing was right, and I really feel like the pregnancy helped my family to grieve and gave us something to look forward to. It couldn't have happened at a better time now looking back. My first trimester of pregnancy was pretty amazing. For some reason, I had like excessive energy. I was still working out at this time, being very active. I worked out throughout my entire pregnancy, actually, stayed pretty active. Of course, I had to make some changes. I couldn't do everything that I was doing before. But by my second trimester, I developed pregnancy-related carpal tunnel in both of my wrists. I didn't know that that was a thing, but it happens to some pregnant women. There's not much that they can do. They told me to wear braces, but at night, I would wake up in excruciating pain. I would be up pacing the floor, shaking my hands out, and eventually started sleeping in a recliner chair so that I could keep my arms out to the side. So having that blood flow seemed to help a little bit. By about my third trimester, the pain did not necessarily go away. It just wasn't as drastic. I just had a constant numbing in my wrist and my hands. I lost pretty much all of my fine motor skills. So I couldn't button buttons to get dressed. I couldn't put earrings in. It was painful to cut my food. I had to have my husband cut my food for me. And that lasted throughout my entire pregnancy, and about, I think, 2 to 3 months after delivery, finally the carpal tunnel kind of subsided and I was feeling better. Also during my second trimester, I started having digestive issues that I never had before. I noticed extreme constipation, or I was running to the bathroom multiple times a day. So it was kind of on both ends of the spectrum there. But I also started noticing blood in my stool for the first time, and that's alarming. I did mention that to my OB doctor at my next appointment, and he said, oh, it's probably just internal hemorrhoids. That's very common during pregnancy. I do have some foam that I could prescribe you if you would like. But I declined the foam. I said, well, I'm fine. I'm not in any pain or anything. It's just very alarming to see blood in your stool. So I kept on going throughout my pregnancy. I made it to the 3rd trimester. And during my 35 weeks of pregnancy, I went into the doctor for just a routine checkup. When I went in that day, my blood pressure was extremely high. I was starting to swell a little bit. And so they said, are you seeing spots? Are you having headaches? They started asking me all these questions about high blood pressure. I wasn't having any symptoms, so they had me lay down in a room for a few minutes and said, we'll come back in and check your blood pressure again in a few minutes. So they did that. And that time they said, okay, well, your blood pressure is a little bit lower, but it's still not where we need it to be. And you know what? We need to see you back later this week on Thursday, so we'll just run another test and we'll check your blood pressure then. I went home that evening and I told my husband, if I go into that doctor appointment on Thursday and my blood pressure is still high, they're going to put me on bed rest for the next 5 weeks. And that was really upsetting because you want to use your time off with your child at home, not just laying there by yourself. I never made it to Thursday because Tuesday I went into work. I just started back a school year, just started back to work a couple of weeks. And that Tuesday I woke up and I told my husband that I did not feel well. And a couple people at work said, are you okay? You don't look like you feel well. And I said, actually, I don't feel well. I couldn't pinpoint anything. I just didn't feel myself. I felt off. I went home that afternoon and I was swelling. My feet were swelling, my ankles. I took a little nap, put my feet up, but I had to go back to work that evening. We have something at the beginning of the school year that we call open house, where the parents can come a few weeks after school started and kind of walk through their student schedule and meet with the teachers. So I had to go back to school that evening for about an hour or so. As soon as I said goodbye to the last parent, I knew something was terribly wrong. I was starting to have pain in my upper right abdomen. So I looked over at the 2 teachers across the hall and I said, I'm going home if somebody's looking for me. I don't feel well. I think something's wrong. They, of course, wanted to call my husband, but I said, I'll be fine. I'll drive home. I probably shouldn't have driven home that day because I was really, at this point, struggling to breathe. I was having some trouble breathing as well. I made it home, and I told my husband and my stepdaughter that I think we might need to go to the hospital. But maybe it's just something crazy. Maybe it's just gas. Maybe I just need to lay down for a few minutes. So I did go and lay down, and it just got worse. The pain got worse. I was really struggling to breathe at this point. So eventually I was taken by ambulance to the hospital. As soon as I got into the ambulance and the EMT hooked me up to whatever IV that he had in me, I felt amazing. And we were joking, and I was finally feeling better, and I could breathe a little bit. And, he said, whatever his name was, I can't remember. He said, that would be a good name to name your son since, I saved your life tonight. So I was feeling amazing by the time my husband and stepdaughter followed us in the ambulance to the hospital. When we got to the hospital, my OB was on call that night, and I love him. He's very straightforward. He's very, very frank. And he very quickly ran some tests on me, and he explained to me that I had a type of preeclampsia called the HELP syndrome. HELP is an acronym. So the H stands for hemolysis, which is the breaking down of the red blood cells. The EL then stands for elevated liver enzymes, so that would explain why I would be hurting in my upper right abdomen. And then the other LP stands for lower blood platelet count. At this point, my blood pressure was pretty much at stroke level. There are very few treatments for the HELLP syndrome. One, of course, would be bed rest. So that was one thing my doctor explained. Well, we could put you on bed rest. But he also had me go use the restroom to get a sample. And just in my taking my drip with me, my IV drip to the bathroom from my bed just to the bathroom that was in my room, my blood pressure skyrocketed again. So he said, I don't really think bed rest is a great option for you. So instead, we talked about blood transfusions, or we could go ahead and deliver the baby. That really is the only way to cure the HELLP syndrome. My husband looked at me and he said, Dawn, we can't be doing blood transfusions. I'm worried about your health. I'm worried about the health of our child. And of course, the doctor said at 35 weeks, your son's going to be completely fine. His lungs will be formed. If you were my wife, I would tell you we need to go ahead and have surgery, prep you for surgery. So that's what we decided to do. And at 10:01 that evening, my son was born. Parker was 3.4 pounds and 17 inches long. I remember them bringing him to my chest so that I could see him for a few moments, and then they whisked him away. He was immediately taken to the NICU, where I was not allowed to actually see him for 24 hours. I had a catheter and was unable to get out of the bed for exactly 24 hours. Those nurses were in there at exactly 24 hours to take me down to the NICU to see my son. And if they weren't, I was going to be hollering for them. At that point, all I could see were pictures that my husband would take when he would go down there. My son had to spend 16 days in the NICU until he got to be 4 pounds. They would not send him home until he got to 4 pounds. This picture just doesn't even show. I tried to find one that would really show if you could see my husband's hand and the size of the bottle, how small a 3.4 pound baby is. I took home a 4 pound baby and was terrified. Those years following being a mom were pretty tough. I started to kind of develop those bad habits again. I stopped being active. I wasn't going to leave my baby and go work out and go to the gym. And I surely wasn't going to put him in the gym daycare with people I did not know. I also started eating more convenience foods. We started eating out a lot more. It's easy. And so I started kind of seeing those bad habits continue. For the next 5 years, I really struggled with my digestion. I do believe my UC symptoms started during pregnancy when I saw the blood in my stool and I was starting to have issues with constipation and running to the bathroom multiple bowel movements a day. This continued for 5 years until I got my diagnosis. Moms, women, we know that we put ourselves last, so I let this go on for probably too long before I actually did make an appointment to see a doctor. I went to my GI doctor. She was phenomenal. She really was very helpful. She listened. She really did want to help me. But once I felt like we exhausted everything and we weren't finding anything that was working for me, I asked for a referral to a GI doctor. She was kind of reluctant to make that referral. I'm not sure why, but eventually she did. At my first GI appointment, he thought that I just had IBS, told me that maybe I should try the low FODMAPs diet, and kind of sent me on my way. I came back again, made another appointment, said nothing's working, I'm actually getting worse. I'm losing weight without trying to. I am feeling like I can't even go to work anymore. I don't have energy. I'm sick. And so finally he said, you know what, let's go ahead and do a colonoscopy. I think they even did a stool sample. And when he told me that everything was fine and everything was clear in my colonoscopy, I kind of lost it. Like, well, then what's wrong? If everything's fine, I'm not healthy. I knew that what I was going through was not right. I had periods where I was extremely inflamed and I could not lose weight. And then I had periods where I was so sick that I was losing weight rapidly. We know that going to the bathroom multiple times a day like we can and losing that amount of blood is not right and not healthy. I let this continue on. Eventually, I went back to the GI doctor. That particular GI doctor that I went to first, he had moved away, so they hired someone new. Same thing. He said, well, I think you probably just have IBS. Let's go ahead and you just had a colonoscopy like a year ago, and it came back clear, so let's just try the low FODMAPs diet again. I came back a few weeks later, and I said, I really gave the diet a go. I really did. And I was constipated for 2 weeks. I did not go to the bathroom for 2 weeks. I tried everything. I was eating prunes, drinking magnesium citrate, enemas, you name it, I tried it. I eventually had to go to the ER where they gave me an enema to help me to have relief. I went back to the doctor, explained all this to him, and he said, okay, let's go ahead and do another colonoscopy. We went ahead and did the colonoscopy, and he came back and said, yes, you have ulcerative colitis. I knew it. I already knew this, but I needed somebody to tell me, okay, you have ulcerative colitis. Now let's figure this out together. Let's figure out how we're going to heal this. So we started off with medication. He did prescribe mesalamine. I gave that a couple of weeks, and he said, come back and see me in a couple of weeks. I came back a few weeks later with absolutely no change in my symptoms, and he was shocked. So he did prescribe some rectal foam, I believe it was. I don't remember the name. And my insurance denied that medication. So when I called the office and explained that the insurance denied this medication that he wanted me to try next, he said, well, just continue on with the mesalamine then. That wasn't working in the first place. I was lost. So I started doing my own research. And that's how I found the SCD. If y'all have researched ulcerative colitis or Crohn's, you might see some crazy stuff out there. I saw one guy who claimed that he cured his IBD by only eating bananas all day long. And that makes me laugh because have you seen some of Jeffrey's posts about how many bananas he eats? But I wanted to eat more than bananas all day long. I was 100% convinced to try the SCD diet as soon as I read the book. Gosh, Elaine's determination to heal her daughter. That is a mother's love right there, right? But I was determined to try the diet. As soon as I finished the book, I started on SCD. I had great results with the diet. Within 5 days, my bowel movements were completely improved. I did not experience constipation anymore. I had a drastic decline in the amount of bowel movements, and I had absolutely no more blood in my stool that I could see. I was convinced. I already knew I treated my IC, basically, symptoms with my diet, just figuring out my triggers. So I knew that SCD was the right pathway for me over medication. The SCD diet helped me for many years. I just treated my symptoms just with the diet. During COVID, and I don't know that this is related or not, but during COVID and when the vaccines came out, after I got the second vaccine, I did start a little mini flare. So that led me back to a GI doctor. Again, it was a new one that was hired at the hospital. And I really do like him. He's phenomenal. Now, of course, he doesn't really believe in diet, the diet helping the symptoms, but he's supportive of it. And he put me back on mesalamine, but a different dosage than what I had been on previously that wasn't working. And that helped me pretty much immediately. So I am currently on mesalamine once a day. The SCD diet really changed everything for me. It allowed me to feel healthy again and strong enough again that I felt like I could go back and do some exercises, get back into fitness. And so I did have some goals. I started going back to the gym a little bit, but I did have some fitness goals. So last year, I hired a personal trainer, and his name is Kelvin. Kelvin was not familiar with Crohn's or colitis or the diet that I was on, but he was willing to train me and help me. And so I went to him and I said, okay, my goal is to get up on stage. I want to compete as a bodybuilder. And how long would that take me, essentially? And he said, 5 months. If he had said a year without a glass of wine, I was probably going to walk out of there. But I felt like 5 months was pretty doable, 20 weeks. All right, I'm going to give this 20 weeks. It was a struggle. The workouts, obviously, some days I was in the gym 2+ hours. Some days I was in the gym twice a day. Not because I had to work out twice a day, but maybe I didn't have 2 hours in the morning to work out, so I had to split it up, maybe an hour in the morning, an hour in the afternoon. The diet for bodybuilding was a lot of food. I had to eat 6 times a day, every 2 hours. Think about that food prep. Anywhere I went, I had my little lunch box, my ice box with food. If I went to church and then afterwards had to go to Costco, I had to sit in the Costco parking lot and eat my food. On the diet, there was, for the carbs, I was allowed to eat a cup of berries in the morning, strawberries, blueberries, whatever. One meal included an apple. So, of course, those were fine. But one meal included, I think, 3 ounces of sweet potatoes, and one meal consisted of rice. I don't remember the amount of rice. So, of course, I had to tell my trainer, well, those are 2 things that I cannot eat, but I know I need to eat these carbs because I know I need that fuel to fuel my workouts or I'll never make it through. So we had to sit down and figure out what were some carbs that would help fuel these the workouts. So he helped me, and we decided I was going to try, which I had not up until this point tried in my diet, were black beans, because these were kind of considered maybe, after you've been in remission for some time. And I just wasn't willing to try them, but I figured I needed to try them now. So black beans were something I added into my diet, as well as lentils and lentil pasta. So those 2 things really helped to fuel my body and fuel my workouts. Last July, I competed for the first time. If you don't know a whole lot about bodybuilding, there are different federations. The federation that I did is called the SMBF, which is Supernatural Bodybuilding. It's more local to where I live. They pretty much only do competitions in like Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina. There are also national federations and then international, the IFBB, International Federation of Bodybuilding. When you get into those bigger shows, sometimes competitors there will use performance-enhancing drugs. Obviously, that's not something that I'm interested in, and I don't want to try and compete against somebody who has used those drugs because I would not win. So this was a nice little start for me to do kind of a local show. They are drug-free, so we did have to be drug tested. And this was actually a Christian-based bodybuilding competition. So they are very particular on some of the things that they look for. Our bikini bottoms had to have so much coverage on the glutes and things like that. Also in bodybuilding, you are considered an amateur until you win your pro card, is what it's called. And then if you are lucky enough to win your pro card, some people compete multiple times and they never receive the pro status, then you do not win money. You just continue to compete as an amateur. In my first competition last July, I did the novice competition, which is for new bodybuilders, anybody new or you've not won 3rd place or higher. I competed in the masters category, which is over 40. And then I also competed in the open category, which is anybody in your category can compete in that one. I won all 3 first place trophies for my first competition and was awarded my pro bodybuilding show card. Oh, thank you. I was really going to be a one and done. This was a bucket list thing, not doing this ever again. But as soon as I got off that stage, I was like, when can I get back on? I really thoroughly enjoyed it. I met some amazing people. But I did take some time off, wanted my body to reset a little bit. But I did compete again this past April, so my first time competing as a pro. And I received a 3rd place trophy and a little bit of a money reward for that competition. And then I just competed about a month ago in July, again at the pro level, and I won 1st place. Thank you. This has really opened up some doors for me because my amazing coach and trainer, he also owns his own gym. And after I competed last July, he saw something in me and said, I think you would be an amazing trainer. And I would be happy to hire you at my gym if that was something that you would be interested in. So I currently teach 4 fitness classes at his gym. And I also have 4 clients that I train twice a week, one-on-one. So this has opened up some really amazing doors for me to help others as well. I'm really appreciative for him seeing something in me and allowing me to help others. My future goals right now would be to continue to help others. It's kind of tough right now starting back to school. I probably can't take on any more like one-on-one clients or teach any more fitness classes. However, my trainer has invested in an app where now we are going to be training. I can train anybody from across the world. It's amazing for those who maybe would like to have a personal trainer, but it's very costly. So this is another option where you can have a personal trainer who's going to design your workouts for you on the app. It can be an at-home workout if you don't currently go to a gym, or it could be a gym workout. It shows you the movement. It also gives you a video of the movement, also gives you the written description of the exercise as well, and there's a nutrition component built in as well. So this is something I'm getting ready to launch in about the next 2 weeks. I want to kind of get settled into back to school, and then I hope to really start getting some online clients as well with my personal training. Another big goal that I have, this is probably a large aspiration here, but eventually I would love to continue my education and become a registered dietitian. That really is the only way that I would be able to help others with digestive issues or diabetes or any kind of inflammatory bowel disease, any of those diseases, to help them with nutrition and their fitness goals. Before I finish up today, though, I want you all to know that I pray for you daily. For anyone who suffers with IBD, I pray for you. For any of you who are caregivers, know someone who suffers with IBD, I pray for you as well, and we are so thankful for your support. Thank you.
Wow, thank you, Dawn. What an inspiring and journey you've been on, and
Thank you.
so inspirational to see you come this far and put all these medical issues behind you, and now helping other people. That's fantastic, and best of luck going forward.
Thank you.
As people write their questions, I'm happy to read them out for you. One question I have while that happens, Dawn, is, we heard earlier today, lifestyle globally, can send you downhill and back up as you recover. So, and we know exercise is itself a beneficial factor in health in general, and maybe in IBD as well. So I'm wondering if you think SCD kind of gave you the space and energy to get back in the gym, and then it was sort of a double whammy, and then the exercise and the athletics took over and sent you to a whole new orbit. Do you think that was part of the story?
Yes, SCD helped me to feel like I could get back into fitness again. When I was sick, there was no way. I mean, I tried to go to the gym when I wasn't feeling well. I couldn't make it through most of the workouts. If I did, I just knew I was going to pay for it later, I guess. So SCD really helped me feel like I could get back into fitness. It made me feel stronger. And also, I already looked at bodybuilding. Well, okay, I'm already doing a pretty limited diet anyways. And I've been doing it for years. So surely I can do the bodybuilding diet, right? That's going to be the easy part. The workouts are going to be the hard part. I was so wrong. It was the exact opposite. The diet was not easy. When you have to eat so much food and every 2 hours, making sure that you are fueling your body, that was really difficult, a difficult change. But it was great that I was able to accommodate the bodybuilding diet as well as continue with SCD. My trainer did want me to take a lot of supplements. That is part of the bodybuilding, like fish oil and all kinds of different things, but I did not use any of the supplements that he suggested.
Some good questions here. Can you please share more information about how you increase your nutritional intake to meet your caloric needs with bodybuilding, exercising, especially because carbs are hard to do on SCD?
Yes, so my trainer gave me my macros. Macros are your calorie intake. Well, really, macros are your grams of protein that you should get, your carbs, and your fats. So he looked at my body weight, my height, and he was able to calculate my macros and my calories as well. So I just had to make sure I was following that. I had to eat about, I think it's like 80% to 100% of your body weight and protein. So when I started out, I was like, say 130 pounds before I got on stage. So I would eat around 130 grams of protein a day. To do that, you really have to be intentional. Every meal included protein, a protein and a carb. So that's pretty much my entire diet was a protein and a carb. My carbs consisted of any green vegetables. I was allowed to have any kind of green vegetables, so I ate a lot of green beans, broccoli, asparagus, Brussels sprouts. And then for my carbs, I use the black beans, lentils, and fruit. Dates were great.
Yeah, this is a question that comes up because SCD is not necessarily a low-carb diet, but when you do eat carbs, like bananas, it displaces the other things in your diet because you can only eat so much protein after you've had a banana, right? So it kind of almost becomes a juggling act between how much carbs you eat, how much protein you eat, and then I think ultimately when you do heal and your gut's actually functioning the way it needs to, you can then feed it more and it can actually absorb more. So it's sort of like the patients I've supported, it's almost like you second prioritize caloric intake, and yes, you do lose weight. Yes, doctors worry about it, but you kind of do that very carefully and close monitoring. And then once the healing happens, you quickly catch up on the weight gain, and you obviously don't want to have loss of height and growth and stature and all that. So with pediatrics, it becomes quite important. I know Natalie's going to talk about that tomorrow. So these are good questions you're asking. You mentioned multiple rounds of antibiotics for your conditions. Do you think that actually triggered your UC? What did your doctor say?
No doctor has ever told me that that would have triggered my UC. I do believe that. I do believe that during those 2 years of, year and a half to 2 years of constantly taking antibiotics, I know I messed up my microbiome. And then I went through that period of not eating healthy again, so I was probably not helping to heal my gut at that time and replenish it with the good bacteria.
Yeah. How is your son doing? And I'm curious if you're doing anything differently in raising him because any sensitivities? Any suggestions?
Yeah, that's a great question. So being a preemie, they say it takes about 2 years for them to kind of fully catch up. He's wonderful. He has no medical issues other than a little vision problem called nystagmus, where his eyes kind of shake back and forth. But he has no digestive issues, and he eats a pretty full diet. He is 9, so it's a lot of junk food, more junk food than I would like for him to eat. He loves those Takis. So spicy too, on top of the junk. So I think he's got a pretty good,
He's
a
come
pretty
a long
strong
way.
stomach.
Yeah,
Yes.
yes. That's awesome to hear. So a couple more questions. What do you do? What do you eat after your workouts to replenish yourself?
I feel like I eat all the time. So yes, it's usually a meal. So if I work out in the afternoons, then I go straight home and usually eat my dinner. But again, it's going to be a protein and a carb.
So the app that you talked about will have SCD for bodybuilding, or is it more open-ended?
It is more open-ended, but it does have the option, from my understanding, where you can, we can go ahead and go in and click, like you can't eat these things, and we can go ahead and check off. So your individual diet plan will not have anything listed that you cannot eat for SCD.
So we're going to be eating in a few minutes. People can just go stand behind Dawn as she makes her food selections. You can kind of get a real-time view of what's going on. All right. Just one more question. Do you do aerobic as well as anaerobic exercise?
I do. Really, the workouts that I prefer are like HIIT style, so high-intensity training, interval training. I like to use strength training machines, cable machines, weighted machines, but I also feel like you have to use free weights too. So for cardio, my trainer 100% believes in the Stairmaster. So during training, I would have to do as much of my cardio on the Stairmaster as possible, up to 90 minutes a day on the Stairmaster.
Wow. All right. Last question here. Have you learned the connection or the correlation between intestinal cystitis and your UC via any of your research or experience? Maybe is it just inflammation?
I have not spent enough time researching that, but I think that is why it's so important for us to share. I could have just come today and shared about my UC, since that's why we're really here, is for IBD. But I decided after talking to Jeffrey that maybe I should share my whole story and add in these other issues that I experienced as well, because even though they might have seemed a little bit minor and maybe not related at all to the ulcerative colitis, it's important for us to share those things, especially with our doctors. Every little thing, as minor as you might think that it is, it's important for the doctors to continue to hear these things so they can start saying, oh, wait a minute, I have several patients who are suffering from this, but they've also experienced this. And that's how the research starts.
Yeah, good point. Okay, one last question I lied. Have you added any, so this is not for everybody, but have you added any non-SCD carbs to your diet, such as sweet potatoes, rice, or oats?
I have not. I have considered it, but I'm feeling so well. I've already been able to reach some of my fitness goals, so I don't really see why I would need to try to mess with a good thing.
Fantastic. All right. Wonderful story. We really appreciate your journey, Dawn. That was a great personal story to tell us. She's going to be here all day today, later tomorrow as well. So feel free to reach out to her if you have any other questions. And thank you. One more round of applause. Thank you.
Thank you.